Every day at exactly 5:45 a.m., Terrence is at the abandoned Majestic Theater to bring warm ginger tea to Beatrice. But this morning, she is gone, lying in a coma at a rundown local hospital. To save her, Terrence hands in her old metal box, accidentally triggering a red alert at the Defense Intelligence Agency. It turns out this poor woman is a legendary codebreaker whose identity was erased to hide a $1 million corruption scheme. While hidden enemies hunt the father and daughter, 3 military officers suddenly knock on their door. Are they here to silence him or to bring him to the Senate? Before that knock ever came, Terrence Washington had a much smaller world to worry about. His world smelled like diesel fumes and cold concrete. Every night, he pushed pallets across the floor of Apex Logistics from 10 o'clock until 5 in the morning. His hands ached. His back ached worse. The forklifts roared like tired animals under the fluorescent lights. The coal from the warehouse floor climbed straight through his boots. His fingers stayed numb inside thin work gloves. Every hour felt the same, box after box, beep after beep from the scanner gun. His paycheck came out to $16.50 an hour. It was never enough. The electric bill sat unpaid for 12 days, and it had grown to $218.45. Rent was due to $1,250, and his landlord had already used the word eviction twice that week. Terrence kept a photo of Chloe taped inside his locker. Some nights, that photo was the only thing that kept his legs moving. On weekends, he drove for Metro Eats between warehouse shifts, delivering burgers and coffee across cold Philadelphia streets. His old sedan rattled at every red light, heater barely working. Chloe's sneakers had a hole near the left heel, patched twice already with duct tape. She never complained about it, not once. New shoes soon, Terrence promised her one evening, tucking her into bed. And a real dinner with real beef in it. Chloe just smiled and hugged her stuffed rabbit tighter. She believed him completely, the way only a child can. Some mornings, a businessman in a sharp coat would step wide around Beatrice's cardboard mat, wrinkling his nose in disgust. He never once looked down at her face. Terrence always wondered what made people so afraid of kindness. Maybe it reminded them how thin the line really was. Still, Terrence had one soft spot in his tired life. Her name was Chloe, his 8-year-old daughter. Her sneakers were falling apart at the heel. He had promised her a real dinner soon, one with actual beef in it. Every morning after his shift, before the sun came up, Terrence walked past the old Broad Street line station. Cold wind cut through his jacket like a blade. Above the entrance stood the crumbling marquee of the Majestic, a theater nobody had used in decades. Broken letters still spelled out half a word from some long-forgotten show. Pigeons roost in the old rafters above the ticket booth, cooing softly in the cold morning air. Under that broken marquee lived a woman named Beatrice. Nobody knew where she came from. She was maybe 70 years old, with white hair and sharp, tired eyes. She always sat up straight on a flattened piece of cardboard, even in the freezing dark. Most people walked past her without looking. Some sneered. Terrence never did that. Every single morning at 5:45, for 8 straight months, he brought her something warm. A container of homemade chicken soup, 2 slices of buttered toast, a thermos of ginger tea to fight the cold in her bones. The soup steam always fogged up the cold morning air between them. Beatrice would wrap both hands around the warm container first, before ever taking a bite. She said the heat felt like something she had almost forgotten existed. He never asked her questions about her past. She never asked him for pity. There was something quiet and equal between them, like 2 tired soldiers nodding at each other in a war neither one talked about. Sometimes she quoted old military phrases under her breath, phrases Terrence never understood. He just nodded along, the way you nod at a song you don't know the words to. One frozen morning, Beatrice taught Chloe how to read the hands of an old wind-up watch. Another morning, she taught her a strange little game with pebbles, black and white stones lined up in patterns of 0 and 1. Chloe thought it was just a fun puzzle. It was not. Being poor is no excuse to walk with your head down. Beatrice told the little girl one icy morning. She tucked her worn blanket tighter around her shoulders. Terrence didn't understand why those words stuck with him so hard, but they did. Then came a Tuesday morning colder than any before it. The temperature had dropped below 28 degrees. Terrence walked to the theater steps at 5:45 sharp, soup in hand, steam rising into the icy air. Beatrice's spot was empty. The cardboard was still there. Her thin blanket was still there. But she was gone. Terrence's chest went tight. He called her name into the dark, his voice cracking against the cold silence of the station. No answer came back. Only the hum of a broken vending machine answered him from somewhere down the tunnel. A pigeon shuffled across the frozen tile, the only living thing in sight. Something felt wrong, deep in his stomach, wrong in a way he couldn't name yet. Under the blanket, he found something strange. An old, dented metal box, military green, its paint chipped and scarred by time. Stamped faintly on the side were the letters NSA Sigint, 1989 BM. He didn't know what those letters meant. He only knew he had to find her. 50 feet down a narrow alley, he found her. She was curled on the frozen ground, breathing in short, ragged gasps. Her forehead burned with fever. Her lips had gone pale and cracked. Terrence dialed 911 with shaking fingers. Sirens screamed through the gray morning fog minutes later. Paramedics rushed her onto a gurney, an oxygen mask pressed over her face. She was taken to Temple University Hospital, into the section reserved for people with nowhere else to go. Terrence stood outside the sliding glass doors long after the ambulance left. His hands were still shaking. The soup container sat forgotten and cold on the pavement beside him. Inside, fluorescent lights buzzed over rows of plastic waiting chairs. A television mounted on the wall played the morning news with no sound at all. Hours later, a hospital administrator named Dr. Marcus Sterling pulled Terrence aside. His voice was flat, like he had said these words 100 times before. "She has no ID," Sterling said. "No valid social security number. Our system says her file was deleted." Terrence blinked, confused. "How does a person's whole life just get deleted?" "Are you family?" Sterling asked, tapping his pen against the clipboard. "No," Terrence admitted. "Just a neighbor, sort of." Sterling sighed, the kind of sigh that had given up on kindness a long time ago. Sterling explained that surgery would cost $14,250 up front. Without it, Beatrice would be sent to a public shelter facility on the edge of the county. Everyone there called it the place people don't come back from. Terrence checked his Wells Fargo account on his cracked phone screen. $42.18. That was everything he had left in the world. He wasn't her family. He had Chloe to think about. He had rent due in 9 days. Every fair, reasonable part of his mind told him to walk away right now. But another quieter part remembered the warm way Beatrice always wrapped her hands around that soup container first. Terrence picked up the old metal box from the hospital chair beside him. He told himself he had already done enough. He turned toward the exit doors, ready to walk away and never look back. But his feet wouldn't move past the parking lot. That night, back in his cramped apartment, Terrence set the dented box down on the kitchen table. Chloe ran her small fingers along its scratched, cold surface, curious. Tucked inside the lining of an old coat Beatrice used to wear, Chloe found a folded scrap of paper. The handwriting was sharp but shaky for Albright. Room 402, Federal Building. Don't trust Cole. Terrence's hands felt cold holding that small scrap of paper. Chloe watched him quietly, sensing something serious was happening. Terrence sat down slowly, staring at the note. Words Beatrice once said under the station lights echoed back to him. "When the system turns its back on you, TJ, don't trust what's on the screen," she had told him one frosty morning. Trust the real numbers underneath. He looked at his daughter, remembering another lesson Beatrice had given her. Being poor was no excuse for bowing your head. Somehow, this frail old woman was holding a secret bigger than both of them combined. Terrence realized something with a cold, sudden clarity. He might be her very last hope. Sometimes the smallest kindness carries a debt nobody knew existed. Terrence was about to learn just how heavy that debt could be. The next morning at 10:47, Terrence stood outside the federal building on Market Street. He wore a borrowed Metro Eats delivery jacket, hoping it would get him past security. It worked. Nobody looked twice at a delivery driver carrying a paper bag. The lobby smelled like floor wax and old coffee. A metal detector beeped somewhere behind him as another visitor walked through. He rode the elevator to the 4th floor, heart pounding against his ribs. Room 402 was chained shut, a printed sign taped across the door, dissolved. No one named Albright worked anywhere near this floor. Panic crawled up his spine. He rushed downstairs to the Central Records desk instead, praying someone there could help him trace Beatrice's family. He asked a records clerk to scan the barcode stamped on the old metal box. She shrugged, tired, and dragged the scanner across the faded label, without much thought. "This might take a minute," she said, chewing gum loudly, eyes barely leaving her computer screen. Terrence tapped his fingers nervously against the counter, watching the clock above her desk tick forward. A red laser beam swept across the letters NSA SIGINT, 1989 BM. The clerk's screen flashed bright red instantly. Bold white letters appeared. Security Alert Level 5. Notify Fort Meade immediately. The clerk's face went pale. She reached for the phone, with trembling fingers, punching in a number with shaking hands. "Sir, I have a Level 5 alert at the front desk," she said, voice cracking. "The subject is still here." Terrence didn't wait to find out who she was calling. He grabbed a box and ran. He sprinted down a stairwell, lungs burning, box clutched tight against his chest. He had crossed some invisible line, and there was no walking it back now. His mind raced through every possible mistake he could have made. None of it mattered now. He just had to keep moving forward. 2 floors down, an elevator dinged open right beside him. He slipped inside, just as heavy boots pounded down the stairwell behind him. 2 men in dark suits blocked the emergency exit at the bottom of the stairs. Their eyes were flat and cold, nothing like ordinary security guards. "Social services," one of them said smoothly, reaching for the box. "We just need to take that off your hands." Something in Terrence's gut told him not to believe a single word. Years of lifting crates had built strength into his shoulders, and he used every bit of it now. He shoved past the man and bolted into the crowded chaos of Suburban Station. Somewhere behind him, a woman screamed, as the 2 suited men shoved through the crowd, searching. Terrence ducked behind a food cart, heart hammering against his ribs. He pressed his back flat against a cold pillar, waiting, counting his own breaths to stay calm. His phone buzzed while he pushed through the crowd. It was Dr. Sterling calling from the hospital. "Federal agents are here," Sterling whispered urgently. "They're searching Beatrice's room. They're asking about a black man who was with her." Terrence's blood ran cold standing in that packed underground station. Somewhere above him, his daughter was still at school, completely unaware of the storm closing in. He called Mrs. Gable, his elderly neighbor across the hall, and begged her for help. She didn't hesitate for a second. "Bring that baby straight to me," she said. "I've got a safe spot in my basement." By the time Terrence reached his apartment building, sirens were already circling the block like hungry wolves. He slipped Chloe down into Mrs. Gable's cluttered basement, kissing her forehead twice before disappearing back into the dark. "Stay quiet as a mouse, baby," he whispered. Chloe nodded, hugging her knees tight against her chest in the dim basement light. Mrs. Gable squeezed his arm once hard. "Go on now," she said. "I've got her." Above him, footsteps crossed the apartment floor once, twice, then stopped. Terrence froze completely, holding his breath until his lungs burned. Minutes crawled by like hours before the footsteps finally faded away. Down in that damp basement full of old furniture, Terrence finally had a moment to breathe. The metal box sat heavy on his knees, sealed with a mechanical lock made of 8 brass dials. He remembered a warning label near the hinge. If someone forced it open the wrong way, A hidden vial of acid would destroy everything inside instantly. His fingertips traced the cold brass dials one by one. Somewhere above him, a pipe dripped steadily into a rusted bucket, marking time like a slow clock. Terrence's mind raced back to the pebble game Beatrice had taught Chloe. Black stones and white stones, arranged in careful little rows. "Chloe," he whispered into his phone, calling Mrs. Gable's line. "Do you remember the last pattern she showed you? The one with the stones?" Chloe's small voice came through clearly. In the basement, Chloe hugged her rabbit tight and stared at the small crack under the door. She whispered a quiet prayer for her father, the way he had taught her before bed. "White, black, white, white, black, black, white, white." She said it was her birth year, 167. Terrence's fingers trembled as he worked out the binary code, 101100011. He combined it with Beatrice's real birth year, 1955. Sweat beaded on his forehead despite the freezing basement air. One wrong dial, and everything Beatrice had protected for decades would turn to ash in his hands. He turned each brass dial with careful precision. 1, 0, 1, 1, 0, 0, 1, 1, 1, 9, 5, 5. A sharp click echoed through the silent basement. The heavy metal lid popped open at last. Inside, there were no ordinary papers. Terrence found strips of old microfiche film and a small hardware security key. Records showed international wire transfers from a bank called Kreutz and Company in Switzerland. He held one strip of film up to the dim basement bulb, squinting at rows of tiny printed numbers. None of it made sense to him, but he could feel its weight anyway. Whatever Beatrice had been hiding, it was bigger than anything he had imagined. Before he could make sense of any of it, the basement door exploded inward off its hinges. Cole's men had tracked his phone signal straight to the building. Terrence had only seconds to think, and Chloe's safety came first in every single one of them. He bolted out through a side window, leading the men away from the basement and straight toward the old Apex Logistics warehouse. He knew every dark corner of that place by heart. Inside the towering stacks of crates, the men caught up to him fast. Terrence swung a metal pipe, but there were 3 of them, and only one of him. His knuckles split open against someone's jaw. His shirt tore at the shoulder seam. Cardboard boxes crashed to the floor around them, spilling packing peanuts everywhere. One man grabbed the box from his grip and threw it hard against the steel shelf. Terrence lunged and caught it just before it hit the ground. They beat him hard against the concrete floor. Blood ran down his jaw in a thin, warm line. His ribs screamed with every breath. The air tasted like rust and old cardboard dust. Somewhere above, a loose sheet of metal roofing rattled in the wind, over and over. The sound felt louder than his own heartbeat. A cold gun barrel pressed against his forehead, silenced and merciless. "Where's the box?" the man growled. "Give it up, and you die quick and easy." Terrence's heart pounded, so loud he could hear it in his ears. He thought of Chloe hiding safely inside container 402, just yards away in the dark. He said nothing at all. Silence was the only shield he had left to give his daughter. Just as the man's finger tightened on the trigger, a smoke canister crashed through a warehouse window. Glass shattered into 1,000 glittering pieces across the concrete. Armed agents from the Defense Intelligence Agency stormed through the smoke, weapons raised, shouting commands. Cole's men dropped their guns within seconds, hands raised high. A tall man stepped out of the haze, his face lined with old battle scars. Silver hair, sharp eyes, a uniform pressed clean despite the chaos. His name was Major General Richard Albright. He knelt beside Terrence and gently lifted the dented metal box from his bloody hands. "You found her," Albright whispered, his voice shaking with disbelief. "You actually found our legend." Albright explained everything right there on the cold warehouse floor. Beatrice Montgomery had once commanded an entire intelligence unit. She had saved his whole battalion during a mission in the Middle East back in 1991. "We searched for her for years," Albright said quietly, shaking his head. Somebody made sure we never found her. Terrence felt the world tilt sideways, relief crashing through him like a wave. For the first time in days, he let himself breathe. But their troubles were far from over. Kenneth Cole and Senator Evelyn Vance still held serious power across the state. Within hours, they issued a manhunt warrant for Terrence across all of Pennsylvania, accusing him of espionage. Corrupt agents sealed off every road leading out of Philadelphia. Even Temple Hospital, where Beatrice lay unconscious, was placed under strict watch by unfamiliar guards. Albright delivered grim news as they sped away in an unmarked armored vehicle. They had only 4 hours to reach Washington, D.C., 140 miles away, before a critical Senate hearing ended for good. If they were too late, Cole would destroy every backup file that could prove his crimes. Once we cross into Maryland, we're clear of Cole's reach, Albright said, checking his watch. Until then, stay low. Terrence gripped the metal box tighter on his lap, watching the road signs count down the miles. The drive felt endless. Terrence stared out the window, watching gray Pennsylvania hills blur past in silence. His hand was still shaking, though the fight was long over. The armored engine hummed low beneath them. Every mile marker felt like a small, quiet victory against the clock. He thought about Chloe, safe now with federal protection, waiting for her father to come home a free man. He thought about Beatrice, still unconscious, still fighting for her own life somewhere behind them. 3 military vehicles rolled up outside Terrence's apartment building the next morning. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, certain the police had finally come to arrest him. 3 officers stepped out in crisp uniforms, faces solemn and steady. They didn't come to arrest anyone. They came to bow their heads in respect, right there on the cracked sidewalk, in front of every neighbor who once looked down on him. At exactly 10 o'clock that morning, Terrence walked into a heavily guarded chamber inside the United States Senate. He wore his same simple work clothes, dusty boots and all. Marble columns rose high above him, cold and silent under bright ceremonial lights. Reporters whispered from the gallery, cameras clicking softly, as he took his seat at the witness table. Senator Vance and Director Cole sat waiting, sharp suits pressed and confident. They expected an easy, quiet dismissal of a homeless man's wild story. Cole's leather shoes clicked against the marble floor as he leaned back in his chair, smirking. "This man is nothing but a criminal's accomplice," Vance said coldly, barely glancing up from her notes. "Bring in a homeless man to fix veterans' benefits," Cole added with a short laugh. How touching. Terrence didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. He placed the declassified financial records on the table in front of him, calm and steady. He spoke plainly, without a single dramatic flourish. A large screen behind him lit up with wire transfer records, dates, and signatures. Cole's own signature appeared on 11 separate approval forms, each one signed, without a second glance. Cole's face drained of color as the numbers scrolled past. His hand gripped the edge of the table until his knuckles turned white. $24,815,400, Terrence said quietly. Veterans benefits, stolen and hidden under one account. Account number Vance Cole, 99. A junior aide near the back door dropped a stack of papers, the sound sharp in the quiet room. Nobody moved to pick them up. The room fell completely silent. Even the air conditioning seemed to hold its breath. Vance's pen slipped from her fingers and rolled off the table onto the marble floor. A neutral senator rose slowly from his chair at the far end of the room. He announced the immediate arrest of both Cole and Vance for treason against the United States government. Guards moved in without hesitation, cuffing both of them right there in front of the entire committee. Vance's confident smile finally cracked and disappeared for good. Cole's hands trembled as the cuffs clicked shut around his wrists. The same signature he had scribbled on hundreds of careless documents had finally caught up with him. Within days, Beatrice Montgomery's true identity was restored across every government database. The president personally signed an order awarding her the Distinguished Intelligence Service Medal. Soldiers stood at attention around her hospital bed during a small, private ceremony. A folded flag rested gently in her lap as the medal was pinned to her hospital gown. Her eyes glistened, but her back stayed perfectly straight, just like always. Terrence received a formal honor of his own, along with a new position. He was named the executive director of a newly formed Veterans Support Initiative, earning $115,000 a year. No more overdue bills. No more midnight shifts hauling crates in the freezing cold. No more running from anyone. A few weeks later, Terrence and Chloe walked into a private hospital room at Walter Reed, carrying a warm thermos of ginger tea between them. Beatrice sat up in bed, her white hair finally combed and neat. Color had returned to her cheeks. Her sharp eyes softened the moment she saw them step through the door. "Thank you, TJ," she said gently, reaching for the warm cup in his hands. "You kept the signal of kindness clear, even when the whole world tried to jam it." Chloe climbed up onto the edge of the bed, grinning ear to ear. She pulled a small pouch of black and white pebbles from her jacket pocket. "I still remember the pattern," she said proudly. 167, your year. Beatrice laughed softly, a warm and genuine sound, and pulled the little girl into a careful hug. Outside the window, winter sunlight spilled gently across the quiet hospital courtyard. That same week, Terrence took Chloe shopping for a new pair of sneakers, bright white with no holes at all. That night, he finally kept his promise of a real dinner, thick slices of beef sizzling on their small kitchen stove. Chloe ate every bite with a proud, satisfied grin. Terrence watched her, feeling lighter than he had in years. Down the street, the old Majestic Theater still stood boarded up and silent. But Terrence had already started talking with the city about turning that corner into something new. He pictured a small shelter with warm beds and hot meals every morning. He wanted no one else to spend a winter the way Beatrice once had. Mrs. Gable stopped by often now, bringing fresh bread and warm laughter into their little apartment. The neighbors who once looked away now waved first every single morning. At school, Chloe told her whole class the story of a brave old woman and a secret box of pebbles. Her teacher listened with wide, amazed eyes, barely believing a word of it. Some of his old co-workers from Apex Logistics stopped by too, shaking his hand with rough, callous palms. They didn't need fancy words to say they were proud of him. Terrence just smiled and told them the truth. Kindness had never once asked him for anything in return. Terrence stood by the window, watching the two of them together. His chest, for once, didn't feel tight with worry. It felt full instead, warm and steady, like a cup of tea finally reaching someone who needed it most. Outside the hospital window, Philadelphia carried on below them, busy and loud and alive. Somewhere out there, another quiet act of kindness was probably happening right now, unseen by anyone at all. And maybe, Terrence thought, that was exactly how it should be. He looked down at Chloe, still laughing with Beatrice, over the little pile of pebbles. Whatever came next for their small family, they would face it together, warm tea in hand.